AITA for telling my nephew about family dynamics that his parents didn't want him to know. Nephew in question is James, 17 meters. He'll be 18 in December. The other nephew and nieces in question are Cole, 28 meters, and Melody and Bryony, 30F. My sister is the biological mother of Cole, Melody and Bryony. Their father died when the kids were 8 and 10. My sister married James's dad 15 years ago and she never formally adopted him but did raise him as her son. There was a lot of tension and conflict in the home, and Cole, Melody and Bryony all moved out immediately upon graduating, turning 18. The relationship with my sister then ended. It also ended with James and his father. I stayed in contact with the three of them though and have always known where they are and that they are not interested in reconciliation. Ever since my sister took on James as her own, they have allowed him to believe she is his biological mother and that the other kids are his biological siblings, and it was only a few years ago I realized he believed they shared the same father as well. My sister and her husband have always encouraged James to believe that his siblings love and want to know him and that they will have a relationship one day. He has been craving that more in the last 2.5 years or so. He has mentioned it a number of times. Some family members and I tried to convince his parents to at least tell him the biological truth, so he's not faced with it from people who will not care about cushioning his feelings or making sure he's okay. They refused. My sister said there is no biological truth. They are the parents and all four are their kids, and it ends there. James has been talking to me a lot about finding his siblings and being excited to have them back in his life. He mentioned how maybe he could reconcile their parents and them too, and how he hoped to prove they were never replaced by him and that he knows it must have been hard to have a baby come into the family so much later. He believed that was what the estrangement was about, what his parents told him. I decided he needed to know after my sister and her husband refused yet again to talk to him. So I was honest, my sister wasn't his bio mom and his dad was not their bio dad. They were not blood siblings. I told him I loved him and it didn't make him less of my nephew, but I didn't want him blindsided by not getting the response he was expecting. He asked me if they would actually want a relationship with him. I told him no. He confronted his parents about the lies and the way they were setting him up. My sister called and told me I was an asshole and stepped out of my place by telling him what I did, without her and her husband's consent. I can see my nephew, James, is struggling and trying to work out his head after the truth, and it makes my sister's words hit harder. AITA? So you're telling me he has spent almost a decade believing he was responsible for his family breaking apart and struggling with that guilt, and your sister and her husband just let him know? InTA? NTA. These kinds of lies always come out. Better sooner rather than later. Emo. And he's close enough to 18 that your sister's opinion isn't really all that important anymore. His heart would have been broken to pieces if he was really that motivated to find your other nephew and nieces. That poor boy would spend a lifetime trying to heal something using the wrong medicine if you weren't honest with him. Now he can factor in this new truth in his contact with his siblings. If he continues to reach out, it's important he knows the truth. NTA. Edit. Thanks for the awards, folks. I'm glad something I said while crashing from my post-Halloween sugar high made sense. NTA. The biggest reason for my vote is because his dad and stepmom let him think he was the reason the other kids left. That's horrible to put on a kid. I am not saying the rest of the lies are okay, but the way this poor kid must have felt, thinking he was the reason his family couldn't be a family. It was going to hurt even worse if he spoke to his siblings and got hit with that from a place of pain from them. It wasn't your info to share. But he needed to know. Someone had to do right by this kid because his parents were failing him big time. They will obviously blame you. But their actions are probably going to cause them to lose contact with all 4 kids. Wow, that's a lot to unpack. A lot of people may say you've overstepped. But since all family ties are severed, I don't think so. It's important that James understands the real dynamics and can take those to therapy or into life. And honestly, it's important for other reasons. Like medically. I'm glad he has you. NTA. NTA. He is 17. Wanted answers. And it would have been awful he was turned down by the 3 step siblings and found the truth harshly. Also, your sister failed her children so badly. It was nice of you to step in and help her not fail another child. NTA. It sounds like your sister was caught up in a happy family fantasy. Regardless, it was cruel to lie to him about his parentage. And to set him up to be blindsided when he finally sought out his other family members. You did him a kindness by telling him the truth before he went on that journey. Info. Wouldn't he notice that your sister isn't on his birth certificate? When he applies for a passport or needs his birth certificate for a job or driver's license, he might just notice that there is another woman's name there. Did she pass away? My guess is that some piece of paper would have told him eventually. Which is a terrible way to find out. NTA. He should know. It sucks you had to tell him, but he deserved to know. NTA. Their lies were setting him for cruel heartbreak. What did they think was going to happen? He was obviously going to search and eventually find the other kids and they would told him the truth. You thought of his feelings and spared him more pain. Also, my God, he thinks everything was his fault. And his parents let him believe that. That is unbelievably cruel. He's carried that around for so long and they never said a word. And let him believe that he was the cause of the other kids leaving. I can't fathom that level of guilt and the pain it must have caused him growing up. His parents are monstrous to see that and let him believe it. NTA. Your sister and Bill basically put all the blame for damaged family dynamics on James. This poor kid has been going through life thinking his birth wrecked a loving family. That poor kid. NTA. I would never blame anyone for speaking the truth. I personally had a close friend growing up whose parents told him on his 18th birthday the man who raised him was not his father. It messed him up for a couple years. When he finally found his bio dad, the man was in the end stages of a terminal illness and had already lost his memory. There was no reconciliation to be had. Parents want to shield their kids from pain, but in these types of scenarios it's not really pain avoided, it's just pain delayed. If my friend had been told the truth even a few years earlier, he would have had the opportunity to talk with his bio dad and at least had a short time with him. Don't feel guilty for speaking the truth ever. Do follow up with your nephew though. He'll need you to have his back through this however he decides to proceed. NTA. Everyone has the right to know their biological history. It's weird when non-biological parents attempt to live a fantasy of being the biological parent. But it's sick, twisted and cruel when they force the child to also live within that delusion against the child's will and/or without their consent. The truth had to be done by someone. And it takes courage to be that someone. Especially knowing you will get the backlash because your family will find it easier to be mad at you, a reasonable person, than your sister, an unreasonable person who might have unpredictable and disproportionate reactions to criticisms. NTA. He's almost an adult, he deserved to know. NTA. His parents should have told him. They weren't doing their job. He needed to know. NTA people need to know who their biological parents are so they can have an accurate family medical history. There are also myriad social and psychological reasons to not keep this kind of information from someone. It is cruel to let a child live under a guise like this because it is more comfortable for the parents. Children need to be told these things from a preverbal age with appropriate updates to the narrative as they grow. Source: I am donor conceived and my parents told me late in life. It was a massive shock, but I needed to know. As you said, better being told gently by someone who loves him than having it thrown in his face by someone who will reject him. Thinking that being late born is the reason why his siblings don't want him is bad enough because in his mind it is all his fault. NTA. He needed to know before he opened himself to a world of hurt. Further hurt. NTA, your sister is cruel. She let James think it was his fault the family fell apart. And if James never knew the truth, she presumably completely erased the other kid's dead father and banned them from speaking about him. That is horrific. I hope James will realize that what your sister did was not his fault. And I hope the other kids will too. NTA. People have a right to know their biological history. For medical reasons as much as anything. But also because he clearly could tell something was weird about the situation and they'd resolved it by doubling down on the gaslighting and blaming his existence for the parental breakup, distance between him and his siblings. NTA. I went back and forth. What sealed it for me is that your sister and her husband made him think it was his fault his siblings left. The fact they refused to tell the truth is horrible. They are definitely I would be interested in why the older kids all moved out immediately after turning 18. And do they really blame the then 57-year-old for that? It is better he hear the truth from you than someone who isn't concerned about his feelings. And you have the right mentality that he is still your nephew no matter what.
If you enjoyed this video, please check out our playlists full of similar content. Epic Haircast is like doom scrolling for your ears. Please like, share, and subscribe.